The text arrived while I was in the middle of finishing up a client's facial treatment. My spa, Serenity Glow, had a reputation to uphold calm, peaceful, a haven of self-care. The contrast between my tranquil surroundings and the words glaring up at me from my phone screen was almost laughable. I'm leaving you. Moving to California with Kimmy. Took the money from our joint account. Hope you understand. It's for the best. Andrew. For the best. I inhaled slowly, my fingers never pausing as I gently massaged the cooling serum into my client's skin. Years of training, of perfecting the art of composure, had prepared me for this moment, even if I hadn't realized it at the time. The only sign that my husband of 12 years had just detonated our marriage over text was the slight tightening in my grip on the jade roller. I took a steady breath, forcing the tension out of my fingers. My voice remained soft as I finished explaining the final steps of the client's skincare routine. I smiled as I walked her out, thanking her for her visit. The gentle chime of the front door signaled her departure, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I picked up my phone again, typed out a response. Good luck. Then I turned off my phone, placed it face down on the counter, and locked up the spa for the night. My name is Sophie Harrison. I'm 42 years old, and I have always built things for myself. From the time I was 15, working at a small-town nail salon after school, I knew I wanted to own something of my own one day. A place where women could come in tired, drained, stressed, and walk out feeling renewed, like their best selves. It took years of grinding, double shifts, sleepless nights, saving every dollar I could. While other women in my social circle relied on their husbands for financial stability, I made sure I was my own safety net. By the time I met Andrew at 25, I was already managing my first small spa location. He was charming, in that easygoing way that some men are when they've never had to try too hard for anything. He had ideas, big dreams, but no real plan to achieve them. Still, I fell for his effortless confidence. I told myself that my work ethic was enough for both of us. I married him at 26, with hope in my heart and naivety in my mind. And for a while, I believed in us. But over the years, a pattern emerged. While I spent late nights developing marketing strategies, training new employees, and networking with suppliers, Andrew bounced between jobs that never quite worked out. He was always waiting for his big break, though he never seemed to chase one with any real conviction. I paid the bills. I grew the business. I made our house a home. And he waited. Waited for something easier, flashier, better to come along. And when things got too hard, too real, Andrew did what he always did. He ran. So no, I wasn't surprised by his text. I had seen the signs. The air outside was crisp as I stepped into the night, locking up Serenity Glow behind me. My fingers curled around the strap of my handbag, but I wasn't clutching it in fear or sadness. I was steady. Because while Andrew was preparing to gloat over his new life, assuming I would be shattered, I was already 5 steps ahead. It hadn't happened overnight. The unraveling of a marriage is never a single, defining moment. It's a series of tiny fractures, barely noticeable at first, until one day you look up and realize the foundation is gone. For years, I had ignored the small things. The late nights at work that didn't match his pay stubs. The casual dismissals when I asked about his day. The phone that was always face down, notifications silenced. At first, I convinced myself it was just a phase. Work has been stressful. He's just distracted. Things will get better. But things never got better. It started subtly. A year ago, Andrew suddenly decided he wanted to get in shape. It was out of character for him. He had never been particularly athletic, never cared much about fitness, but suddenly, he was going to the gym 5 nights a week. And not just the gym. He bought new clothes, slimmer fitting shirts, designer jeans that hugged his body a little too well for a man who had never cared about style before. He started wearing cologne again, a scent I didn't recognize. And then, the password changes began. I still remember the first time I noticed. We were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, when his phone vibrated. He picked it up quickly, tilting the screen away from me as he typed something back. "Who's that?" I asked casually. "Just work," he said, setting the phone back down. I reached for it instinctively, the way I always had in our marriage, comfortable in the knowledge that we had nothing to hide. Except now, the screen was locked. A new passcode. A cold, sinking feeling settled in my stomach. "Why'd you change your password?" His answer came too quickly. "Security updates." For the first time in our marriage, I didn't believe him. Then, there were the discrepancies. Andrew had always been bad with money, careless, impulsive, but I had learned to work around it. I paid the bills on time, covered the mortgage, and made sure we had savings for emergencies. But one day, as I was going through our bank statements, something felt off. A series of high-end restaurant charges, all on nights he had claimed to be working late. Hotel stays under a generic company name. Cash withdrawals I couldn't explain. I stared at the transactions for a long time, a slow numbness creeping into my bones. And then I did something I had never done before. I started keeping records. Every transaction. Every charge that didn't make sense. Every lie disguised as an excuse. I opened a folder on my laptop, one I labeled simply Andrew. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. Because deep down I knew. This wasn't going to end well. The moment I knew, really knew, was 3 months ago. It was late, nearly midnight. Andrew had said he was working late again, some last-minute crisis at the office. I was in bed, scrolling aimlessly on my phone, when I noticed his laptop bag still sitting by the door. Curiosity. That's all it was at first. I knew the password to his work laptop, or at least I had. But when I opened it, the login screen prompted for a new passcode. I tried his usual combinations. Nothing worked. And that's when I saw it. A crumpled receipt, half sticking out from the front pocket of his bag. A 5-star steakhouse. Dinner for 2. My chest tightened. The date on the receipt was 2 nights ago, a night he had told me he was working late. I pressed the paper flat against my palm, running my fingers over the ink, as if feeling the evidence would somehow make it more real. I sat there for a long time, staring at that receipt. Then, slowly, methodically, I reached for my laptop and opened a new tab. A new bank. A new account. A new beginning. By the time Andrew crawled into bed that night, murmuring something about exhausting meetings, I had already moved my personal savings out of our joint account. He didn't even notice. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Not to file for divorce, not yet, but to understand my options. To make sure that, when the moment came, I would not be caught off guard. The lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Eleanor Reed, listened carefully as I laid out my concerns. When I showed her the transactions, the hotel charges, the money disappearing, she leaned back in her chair and nodded. "You've already done half the work for me," she said, tapping her pen against her desk. "So, what do I do?" She studied me for a moment, then said, "You wait. You document everything. And when he makes his move." She smiled. "We make ours." So I waited. I kept smiling. Kept pretending I didn't know. When Andrew suggested we combine our finances, I agreed cheerfully, all while ensuring that my business accounts remained separate. When he told me he was going out with colleagues, I kissed his cheek and told him to have fun, then quietly noted the charges that appeared the next morning. When he changed his password again, I stopped asking, because I already had everything I needed. And then, 2 weeks ago, he crossed the final line. I came home early from work, a rare moment of spontaneity. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. A car, not his, not mine. A sleek, red convertible, parked neatly in our driveway. My heartbeat remained steady. I parked, walked inside, and the sound of hurried footsteps upstairs. A door shutting quickly. I walked into the kitchen, set my keys on the counter, and listened. Then, calmly, I called up the stairs, Andrew. A long pause. Then, "Hey, babe. You're home early." Footsteps. The creak of the bedroom door opening. Andrew appeared at the top of the stairs, his shirt rumpled, hair slightly damp. Behind him, down the hall, a door clicked shut. I stared at him for a long moment. He smiled, the same charming, easygoing grin he had always used to talk his way out of trouble. And I realized I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I was just done. That night, I sent one final email to my lawyer. "It's time." Eleanor responded within minutes. "Understood. Everything is in place. Let him think he's won first." So, when the text arrived 2 weeks later, "I'm leaving you. Moving to California with Kimmy. Took the money from our joint account. Hope you understand. It's for the best." I didn't flinch, because I had been ready for this moment all along. The next morning, my phone buzzed with another message from Andrew. "Don't bother begging. Kimmy and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my stuff later." Begging. I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head as I stirred my coffee. He really thought I would break. That I would be sitting in my house, sobbing into my silk pillowcase, devastated by his betrayal. He thought he was in control. That was his first mistake. I scrolled back up through his texts, rereading them, cataloging his arrogance. I had spent years carrying the weight of our lives while he floated from one half-hearted career attempt to the next. And now, he thought he could walk away without consequences? I reached for my laptop and opened a new email draft to my lawyer, Eleanor. Subject: he just made his move. Andrew has officially left. Proceed with filing. Also, I'd like to discuss next steps regarding his use of our joint credit card for personal travel expenses. I hit send and leaned back, tapping my nails against the table. Next, I opened my banking app and checked my business account. Every dollar was accounted for untouched, because I had been smart enough to keep it separate. Then, I checked our joint account. Or rather, what was left of it. Andrew had drained it, just like he said he would. Except he didn't know that I had left it nearly empty on purpose. He thought he had taken everything. But all he had taken was a carefully curated illusion. I smirked, then clicked over to my credit card statement. There it was. 2 first-class tickets to Miami. A 5-star hotel suite booked for 2 weeks. My fingers hovered over my phone. Then I dialed. "Good morning, Mrs. Harrison. How can I assist you today?" "Hi, I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately." "Of course. Can you identify the charges?" 2 first-class flights to Miami, booked yesterday, and a reservation at the Royal Palm Hotel. I paused, letting a touch of dry amusement seep into my voice. "Oh, and I'll need to remove my husband as an authorized user." The representative remained professional, but I could hear the quiet satisfaction in her tone. "Understood, Mrs. Harrison. I'll cancel the charges and issue you a new card. Would you like to receive fraud documentation for your records?" "That would be great." I ended the call, setting my phone down. And just like that, Andrew and Kimmy's little romantic getaway was over before it even started. I could picture them now, breezing into the airport, smiles wide, luggage in hand, only to be stopped at the counter, confused, angry, demanding answers. And then, realizing they had none. I hoped Kimmy enjoyed budget motels. I had just arrived at Serenity Glow, ready to prep for the day's appointments, when my phone buzzed again. "Andrew, what the hell did you do to our credit card? The airline won't honor our tickets. The hotel canceled our reservation. Answer me." I took a slow sip of my coffee before deleting the message. Let him stew. Jenna, one of my best estheticians, popped her head into my office. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," I said with a smile. "Let's get the day started." Friday was our busiest day, and I had a shipment of new luxury skincare products to organize. Life went on, even when your husband ran off with a receptionist half his age. By noon, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Andrew. It was his mother. I let it go to voicemail at first. But when she called a second time, I sighed and answered. Sophie, dear. Her voice was tightly controlled, but I could hear the edge of unease beneath it. Barbara, I greeted smoothly, waiting. Andrew told us everything, she said. He said you were controlling, that you pushed him away, that. I rolled my eyes. Let me stop you right there. Did he tell you he emptied our joint account? Or that he used our credit card to book a luxury vacation with his girlfriend? A pause. Then, a slightly deflated sigh. He said you left him no choice. That you had been distant. Barbara, I cut in, my voice steady. I have texts. Receipts. Do you want me to read them to you? The one where he brags about taking my money? Or maybe the one where he mocks my age? Silence. Then, a quieter sigh. He did seem a bit cruel. I leaned back, crossing my arms. I appreciate the call, Barbara, but I think it's best if we end this conversation here. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Andrew's family during the proceedings. Proceedings? Divorce. A beat of silence. Then already. I ended the call, feeling lighter. By late afternoon, Andrew's sister, Amanda, was spreading family gossip through mutual friends. Apparently, Andrew and Kimmy had checked into a motel near the airport. A motel. Not a luxury suite. Not an ocean view penthouse. Just a cheap, beige-walled, hourly rate kind of motel. He had tried using his personal credit card, but those had been maxed out for months. Another red flag I had noticed. I let out a slow breath, turning my focus back to my work. The boutique side of the spa was thriving, and I had a backlog of new high-end skincare products to unpack. I had a business to run. And Andrew? Andrew had dug his own grave. The final text of the day came late that night. Andrew, you think you're so smart, but I made copies of all the spa's financial records. Half the business is mine. I actually laughed. And then I forwarded the message to Eleanor. She responded almost instantly. Perfect. More proof that he doesn't understand separate assets. He's making this easy for us. I set my phone down, poured myself a glass of wine, and exhaled. Let Andrew keep digging. By the time he realized just how deep the hole was, it would be far too late. The next morning, I woke up to 5 missed calls from Andrew and 3 more from his mother. I let my phone vibrate on the nightstand as I sipped my coffee, watching the city come to life outside my bedroom window. The sun cast a golden glow over the skyline, the same view I had admired every morning since buying this condo. The condo that was mine. Andrew had always wanted me to add his name to the deed. We're a team, babe, he used to say, flashing that easy smile of his. What's yours is mine. Except I had never fallen for that line. Some instinct, or maybe just common sense, had made me keep it in my name alone. Now, that decision felt like divine foresight. By the time I got to Serenity Glow, Andrew's texts had escalated from confused outrage to outright fury. You did this on purpose. You knew I was leaving. Do you realize what you've done? Kimmy and I are stranded here because of you. She's pissed, Sophie. Fix this. Answer me. I took a long sip of my iced matcha latte before hitting delete on every message. Fix this? Oh, sweetheart. This wasn't my mess to fix. I knew exactly where they were, a dingy roadside motel near the airport. I had heard it from mutual acquaintances who were more than happy to spill every last humiliating detail. Andrew had tried to sweet-talk the motel clerk into letting them stay without an immediate payment. It hadn't worked. He had tried using his credit card, only to be informed that it had been declined. Kimmy, who had likely envisioned champagne on a private balcony, was now realizing she had traded a comfortable life for a broke man in a motel with stained carpets. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. I was in the middle of a consultation with a new client when Dana, my receptionist, poked her head into my office. Sophie? There's someone on the phone for you. I raised a brow. I'm booked for the next hour. Who is it? Dana hesitated. It's Andrew's mom. I sighed, rubbing my temple. Did she say what she wants? She said it's urgent. I knew what this was about. I took the call anyway. Sophie, Barbara's voice was exasperated, a mix of anger and desperation. Andrew told me what you did. I drummed my fingers against the desk, waiting. Did he? You canceled his credit cards. You interfered with his travel. I stopped my cheating husband from using our joint finances to fund a romantic getaway. I corrected smoothly. That's not interference, Barbara. That's called accountability. A pause. Then a lower, more measured tone. He has nowhere to go, Sophie. I almost laughed. That's not my problem. He's still my son, she said stiffly. I don't want to see him homeless. I shrugged, even though she couldn't see me. Then I guess he should have thought of that before he walked out on our marriage with a 20-year-old. Barbara sighed, and for a moment, I almost felt a sliver of pity. She knew. She knew her son had screwed up beyond repair. But she still couldn't bring herself to say it. Instead, she said, I just thought you should know. He's desperate. He's blaming you for everything. I'm sure he is. Be careful, Sophie. I smiled, though there was no humor in it. I always am. I ended the call and turned my attention back to work. I had clients to take care of. Andrew had consequences to face. By late afternoon, the cracks in Andrew's little fantasy had turned into full-blown fractures. I was getting text updates from mutual friends, each one more entertaining than the last. Apparently, after exhausting all his options, Andrew had turned to his sister, Amanda, for help. Amanda, who had initially defended him, who had bought into his sob story, had finally seen the light. I can't believe I ever sided with him, she told one of our mutual friends. He didn't just cheat, he's been lying to all of us. According to her, Andrew had spent years embellishing the truth about our marriage, telling their family that I was cold, distant, controlling, that I had made him feel small, inadequate, unappreciated. Meanwhile, I had been the one working 60-hour weeks to keep our lives afloat. I had been the one building something real while he waited for success to fall into his lap. And now, his own family was turning against him. Amanda wasn't offering him a place to stay. Barbara was reluctantly letting him sleep on the couch, but only temporarily. Because, even she knew, this wasn't my fault. This was Andrew's downfall. By evening, my lawyer, Eleanor, called with an update. The judge granted our emergency motion, she said. All remaining shared assets are frozen until further legal review. I let out a slow, satisfied breath. He's going to lose it when he finds out. Eleanor chuckled. I suspect he already has. She wasn't wrong. Minutes later, my phone buzzed with one last text from Andrew. You can't do this to me. You don't get to just take everything and walk away. I tilted my head at the sheer audacity. Take everything? I had built everything. I had protected myself because deep down, I had always known this was a possibility. He had just expected me to roll over and let him win. I forwarded the message to Eleanor, adding it to our growing file. Let him keep digging his own grave. I poured myself another glass of wine and sank into my couch, watching the city lights flicker through my floor-to-ceiling windows. Tomorrow, Andrew would wake up to a very different reality. The one where I was free. And he had lost everything. Monday morning arrived with an almost surreal sense of calm. I had expected to feel something: nerves, tension, even a flicker of doubt. But as I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the sleeve of my navy blazer, all I felt was certainty. This was it. The moment Andrew would finally realize that this wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning. I arrived at the courthouse 15 minutes early, my heels clicking against the marble floor as I walked toward the meeting room where Eleanor, my lawyer, was waiting. She looked up from her files, nodding in approval as she took in my composed expression. Ready? She asked. I smiled. More than ready. She handed me a neatly bound set of documents. Good. Because Andrew's about to get the reality check of his life. When I stepped into the courtroom, Andrew was already there. He had tried to dress the part, probably hoping to salvage what little dignity he had left: a crisp blazer, tailored slacks, polished shoes. But he looked tired. The kind of tired that no amount of expensive cologne or freshly pressed fabric could hide. Kimmy was nowhere to be seen. I wondered how long she had lasted before realizing that dating a middle-aged man with no financial security wasn't the fantasy she imagined. Andrew turned as I entered, his gaze immediately locking onto mine. I watched the flicker of emotions cross his face, first annoyance, then frustration, and finally, a thinly veiled desperation. For the first time in our marriage, he had lost control of the narrative. And he knew it. His lawyer, a stiff, overworked man who looked like he had taken the case at the last minute, stood and cleared his throat as the judge entered. We all rose. Then, the proceedings began. "Mr. Harrison," the judge said, adjusting her glasses as she glanced over the paperwork. "You're contesting the division of assets?" Andrew's lawyer stood too quickly, fumbling with his papers before speaking. "Yes, Your Honor. My client asserts that he is entitled to half of the business assets, as well as compensation for—" Eleanor didn't even let him finish. "Your Honor," she interrupted smoothly, standing with absolute confidence. "The business in question, Serenity Glow, is a premarital asset and was exclusively owned and operated by my client before the marriage. Furthermore, all financial records show a clear separation of business and personal accounts. Mr. Harrison has never contributed financially, nor has he had any legal stake in the company at any point in time." The judge turned to Andrew. "Mr. Harrison, do you have any evidence to support your claim that you contributed to the business?" Andrew shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Well, I supported her emotionally," he blurted out. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Emotionally?" The judge's tone was unimpressed. Andrew's lawyer hurried to recover, flipping through papers as if searching for anything that could justify their argument. "Your Honor, my client played a significant role in the success of the business through his support and encouragement." I almost laughed. Eleanor, however, remained perfectly composed. "Your Honor, if we are to argue emotional support as a financial investment, I believe we need to reassess the meaning of business ownership in the state of California." A few muffled chuckles rippled through the courtroom. The judge let out a long, tired sigh, clearly unimpressed. "Mr. Harrison," she said, turning back to Andrew. "Let me be clear. Do you have any financial proof of investment, any signed agreements, or legal documents that establish shared ownership of Serenity Glow?" Andrew's jaw tightened. "No, but—" "Then your claim is denied," the judge said flatly, stamping something on the paperwork. Andrew's lawyer visibly deflated. But the hearing wasn't over yet. "Now," the judge continued, flipping to another section of the file, "let's discuss the issue of the joint account withdrawal and the fraudulent use of marital funds." Eleanor handed over a document, her movements precise, calculated. "Your Honor, here is the text message in which Mr. Harrison admits to draining the joint account before filing for divorce. Additionally, here is the financial record of him using the joint credit card to book first-class flights and a luxury hotel stay for himself and his girlfriend." The judge adjusted her glasses, reading the messages carefully. I watched as Andrew shifted uncomfortably again, his hands tightening into fists against the table. "Mr. Harrison," the judge said, looking unimpressed, "do you deny using marital funds for personal travel expenses?" Andrew opened his mouth, then closed it again. Finally, he muttered no. The judge nodded. Given the evidence presented, the court finds sufficient proof of financial misconduct. The court orders that all joint assets remain frozen pending final dissolution, and Mr. Harrison is legally required to return any funds removed from the joint account within 24 hours. Andrew's head snapped up. "But that money's gone," he blurted out. The judge barely glanced at him. "Then I suggest you find a way to replace it." Andrew sank back into his seat, the reality of the situation finally crashing down on him. There was no way out. He had lost. As we exited the courtroom, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The air was crisp, the morning sunlight reflecting off the courthouse steps. I pulled my sunglasses from my purse, sliding them on as Eleanor walked beside me. "That went well," she said casually. I smiled. Better than I expected. Behind us, I could hear Andrew's frustrated voice, speaking quickly, trying to argue with his lawyer. But the lawyer, clearly fed up with him, was shaking his head, packing up his briefcase. Andrew had been so sure he could walk away unscathed. So sure he could take from me, betray me, humiliate me, and still win. Instead, he was walking out with nothing. I almost pitied him. Almost. Eleanor glanced at me. "Lunch." I smiled, truly smiled for the first time in a while. "Absolutely." And with that, I walked away free. Andrew always thought he was the smartest person in the room. He had spent years maneuvering through life with smooth words and half-baked promises, always skating by, always assuming that if things fell apart, someone else would pick up the pieces for him. This time, there was no one left to clean up his mess. I hadn't spoken to Andrew since the court ruling, but I didn't have to. The updates came to me through whispers, through texts, through people who had once been mutual friends, but had long since chosen sides. It started with his job. The promotion he had expected? Gone. The company had apparently taken notice of the HR complaint that had been quietly filed against him months ago, a complaint about inappropriate behavior toward a subordinate. That, coupled with the legal drama surrounding his financial misconduct, had been enough for them to politely but firmly inform him that his services were no longer needed. It wasn't a firing, exactly. More of a strong suggestion to seek employment elsewhere. And with his personal credit cards maxed out, his joint assets frozen, and the money he had stolen now a debt he legally owed, his financial world had begun to collapse in on itself. Then came the social fallout. Kimmy had stuck around longer than I expected, whether out of obligation, embarrassment, or the naive hope that Andrew could somehow turn things around. But reality has a funny way of catching up. The final straw, I heard, was the apartment situation. After being denied for multiple leases due to his terrible credit score, Andrew had tried convincing Kimmy to co-sign for a place. Kimmy, to her credit, wasn't that stupid. Instead, she moved out, back in with a college friend, if the rumors were true. And Andrew? He had officially hit rock bottom. Because with nowhere else to go, he was left with only one option. His childhood home. His mother's house. The very place he had mocked for years, claiming he had outgrown his past, moved on to better things. And yet, there he was. 45 years old, divorced, unemployed, and sleeping in the same bedroom where he had once plastered posters of rock bands and movie stars on the walls, dreaming of a future he had never worked for. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the court ruling, I was restocking the boutique section of Serenity Glow when Amanda, Andrew's sister, walked in. I hadn't spoken to her since the hearing, but we had known each other for years, long before this mess unraveled. She hesitated at the entrance before finally making her way toward me. "I owe you an apology," she said, looking almost uncomfortable. I raised a brow, setting down the bottle of luxury facial serum I had been organizing. "For what?" She exhaled, crossing her arms. "For believing him. For defending him. For thinking, even for a second, that you were the villain in all of this." I said nothing, letting her continue. "He told us so many things over the years. That you were controlling. That you belittled him. That he wanted to leave for a long time but felt trapped." She let out a bitter laugh. "And we believed him. Because he made it sound like he was the victim." I studied her for a moment. "And what changed?" Amanda scoffed. "You mean, besides watching his entire life go up in flames because of his own selfishness?" I didn't reply, but my silence was answer enough. She ran a hand through her hair, looking frustrated. I saw the texts, Sophie. The ones where he bragged about stealing your money. The ones where he mocked you, your age, your business, your success. He made it sound like you were nothing without him. But the truth. She gestured around the boutique, her gaze sweeping across the thriving business I had built. He was nothing without you. That, at least, was something we could agree on. By the third week, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Andrew had started going to bars alone. Apparently, he had tried his luck on dating apps, but word had spread quickly about his situation. Women his age wanted nothing to do with a man who had lost everything in a divorce due to his own recklessness. And the younger women he pursued? They were already warned about him. Kimmy had seen to that. Her social media posts had become increasingly pointed, passive-aggressive captions about being blinded by charm and learning from mistakes. And then, one morning, Eleanor forwarded me an email. A legal notice. Andrew had filed yet another petition to revisit the divorce settlement. I sighed, rubbing my temple as I scrolled through the attached documents. Eleanor had highlighted the key parts, along with her usual efficient commentary. He's trying to argue that the financial division was unfair. He also claims he was under emotional distress during the settlement and wants to renegotiate terms. I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. Eleanor had added one last line at the bottom of the email. Don't worry. The judge dismissed it immediately. He's also required to pay court costs. Thought you'd enjoy that. I did. Very much. A month after the court ruling, I got one last unexpected phone call. Barbara. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the best of me. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. He's still blaming you, you know, she said, her voice carrying the weight of exhaustion. I leaned against the counter of my office, crossing one leg over the other. Of course he is. He still doesn't understand, she murmured. He keeps saying you ruined his life. That if you had just let him go peacefully, things wouldn't have turned out this way. I huffed out a laugh, shaking my head. Peacefully? There was a long pause before she finally admitted, I think he truly believed he could leave you, take the money, take half of what you built, and still come out ahead. I waited, letting the silence stretch. Then she said something I didn't expect. You taught me something, Sophie. I blinked. Oh! You taught me the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. Her voice was quiet now, but steady. All these years, we thought we were helping him. That by making excuses for him, by bailing him out of every mistake, we were protecting him. But we weren't. She sighed. We were just making it easier for him to never take responsibility. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Her voice softened. I just wanted you to know that. Before we stopped speaking. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Then, for the first time in years, I let Andrew's mother go. For good. That night, as I locked up Serenity Glow, I paused in the doorway, inhaling the scent of lavender and warm vanilla. I looked around at everything I had built, everything that was mine, untouched, unclaimed by the man who thought he could take it. And I smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I was free. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Serenity Glow expanded to a second location. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Andrew struggled to rebuild his life, the business he had once dismissed as my little side project was thriving more than ever. The new spa, located in one of the most exclusive areas of the city, had booked out appointments weeks in advance before we even opened our doors. I had hired 3 new employees, launched a luxury skincare line, and started working on expanding into wellness retreats. Meanwhile, Andrew? He was still living in his childhood bedroom. Still blaming me. Still waiting for someone else to fix his life for him. I hadn't spoken to him since the settlement, but the occasional updates still found their way to me through mutual acquaintances. His attempts to re-enter the corporate world had failed miserably. Apparently, his former employer had blacklisted him after the HR investigation confirmed his inappropriate behavior toward a subordinate. No one wanted to hire a middle-aged man with a reputation for poor financial decisions and personal scandals. A year after the divorce, I was invited to speak at a women's business conference. The topic? Not divorce. Not betrayal. Success. When the Q&A session opened, a young woman raised her hand. "My husband says I'm being paranoid for keeping my finances separate," she said, her voice uncertain. "He says marriage means sharing everything." I smiled, thinking about Andrew's words all those years ago. "What's yours is mine, babe." I leaned forward. "My ex-husband said the same thing," I said smoothly. "Right up until he tried to take half of what I built." I let the weight of my words settle. "Trust your instincts," I continued. "Protection isn't paranoia." The room was silent, absorbing the message. Then, slowly, people began to nod. Because they understood. The boutique side of Serenity Glow had taken off in ways I never anticipated. Local business magazines had started reaching out, wanting to feature my brand expansion, my entrepreneurial success, not as a woman scorned, but as a businesswoman who had protected her interests and thrived. Andrew had once laughed at my meticulous bookkeeping, calling me obsessive. Now, those same records had saved me. And he? He had nothing left. 2 years after the divorce, I received one last legal update from Eleanor. Andrew had attempted to file another petition to revisit the settlement. The judge had dismissed it immediately. I almost didn't care. Almost. But then Eleanor added, "Oh, and he was ordered to pay additional court costs." Thought you'd enjoy that. I did. 3 years after the divorce, Serenity Glow had grown to 5 locations. The little spa that Andrew had once dismissed now employed over 30 people and had been featured in multiple national magazines. Through mutual friends, I heard that Andrew had finally moved out of his mother's house into a tiny studio apartment above a garage. He was bartending part-time, still clinging to the idea that something big was just around the corner. But nothing ever came, because he had never worked for it. I glanced at one framed reminder on my office wall. A screenshot of the last text Andrew ever sent me before I blocked him. "Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age." Beneath it hung a framed magazine cover featuring me, standing in front of my thriving business empire. I smiled, because sometimes the best revenge isn't anger. It isn't getting even. It's simply winning on your own terms.